He offered her his identification. She responded with a pair of handcuffs and a bruised lip. Officer Jessica Vaughn believed she ruled the streets of Chicago that night. She assumed the man standing beside his $100,000 Mercedes was merely another lowlife she could intimidate to meet her quota. She found it amusing when he claimed to be on duty. A smirk crossed her face as she forced him into the back of her patrol vehicle. However, she was unaware of who was anticipating their arrival at the station. She failed to realize that the man bleeding in her back seat was not only innocent, but the very individual dispatched to terminate her career. Sometimes, retribution doesn't merely knock, it violently breaks down the door. And for Jessica, that door was about to be blown clean off its hinges. The rain in Chicago possesses a remarkable ability to cleanse the city's filth. But on this particular Tuesday night, it seemed only to intensify the dazzling reflections of the neon signs along the magnificent mile against the slick asphalt. It was a frigid, penetrating downpour, the kind that seeps into your very core and lingers. Marcus Thorne stood beneath the awning of the Drake Hotel, glancing at his timepiece. It was a Patek Philippe, discreetly elegant, yet valued far more than the squad car idling 10 feet away at the curb. Marcus adjusted his cuff. He was a man of considerable stature, broad-shouldered, with skin the rich hue of dark mahogany, and eyes that had witnessed so much of life's harsh realities that they remained unflustered by superficialities. At 45 years old, he moved with the composed, potent grace of someone whose authority didn't necessitate raised tones. He was awaiting his wife, Elena, who was concluding her attendance at a charitable gala inside. Marcus harbored a distinct dislike for such gatherings, with their insincere smiles, exorbitantly priced champagne, and the subtle, wary manner in which people clutched their belongings as he passed in his formal attire. He found solace in the quietude of his office, or the unpredictable nature of fieldwork. "Move it along, pal." The voice was sharp, reedy, and carried an air of unearned authority. Marcus lowered his wrist and surveyed the street. The window of the patrol car had been lowered. A woman was staring intently at him, Officer Jessica Vaughn. She appeared to be in her late 20s, her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to cause discomfort, and her eyes were like chips of cold, hard blue flint. "Excuse me," Marcus stated, his voice a deep baritone that resonated subtly above the patter of the rain. "I said move it," Jessica snapped. She opened her door and exited the vehicle. She wore no raincoat, only her uniform. Her badge, number 4922, glinted under the streetlights. Her hand rested on her belt, mere inches from her service weapon. "Loitering is not permitted in front of the hotel entrance. You are obstructing the valet traffic." Marcus scanned the vicinity. The valet station was vacant. No vehicles were present. The street was virtually deserted due to the inclement weather. "I am waiting for my wife, officer," Marcus replied calmly. "She is inside." Jessica emitted a short, unpleasant scoff. She scrutinized Marcus from head to toe, her gaze lingering on his tuxedo, then his watch, and finally his face. It was a look Marcus recognized with weary familiarity. It was the expression that conveyed, "You don't belong in those clothes. You don't belong in this area. You must have stolen that watch, correct?" "Your wife," Jessica emphasized, using air quotes, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "And I'm the Queen of England. Look, I'm familiar with the routine. You stand here looking dapper, waiting for a disoriented tourist to emerge, and then what? Pickpocket them, offer them some illicit substance. I'm not in the mood tonight, buddy. Just walk away." Marcus stiffened. The accusation was so blatant, so predictably tired, that it almost elicited a laugh. Almost, but he knew better. He was acutely aware of the type of officer Jessica Vaughn was. He had reviewed the case files. "I believe you are mistaken," Marcus stated, keeping his hands clearly visible and still. "I am a guest of the hotel. I am not leaving." Jessica's face flushed with anger. She was unaccustomed to defiance. In her 3 years on the force, she had learned that her badge served as both a shield against accountability and a weapon to subjugate anyone she deemed undesirable. And she found men like Marcus particularly irksome. Men who met her gaze. Men who did not cower. "Is that so?" she inquired, stepping closer, infringing upon his personal space. She carried the scent of stale coffee and belligerence. "Are you refusing a lawful order?" "It is not a lawful order if it is predicated on prejudice, Officer Vaughn," Marcus said softly. She froze. "How do you know my name?" It's displayed on your uniform, Marcus pointed out, and I know considerably more. I am aware you have 3 excessive force complaints pending review. I know you were transferred from the 19th Precinct for conduct unbecoming. I would strongly suggest you return to your vehicle and depart. It was the wrong thing to say. Or, perhaps, for Marcus's long-term objective, it was precisely the correct course of action. Jessica's ego imploded. She did not perceive a citizen asserting his rights. She saw a direct challenge to her dominance. She saw a black man in formal wear dictating her actions, and her mind simply fractured. "Turn around!" she commanded, unfastening her baton. "And for what reason?" Marcus inquired, making no move. "Disorderly conduct, threatening a police officer, resisting arrest." "Take your pick," she hissed. "I will document all of them." She lunged forward, seizing Marcus's arm. It was akin to grasping a steel girder. Marcus remained unmoved. He looked down at her hand resting on his expensive suit jacket with an expression of deep disappointment. "Officer, do not proceed with this," he cautioned. "You are making a career-ending error." "Shut up!" Jessica shrieked. Panic seized her. He was too large, too composed. She felt insignificant, a sensation she detested. She pulled back and, acting purely on impulse, struck him across the face with her open palm. Asterisk, crack, asterisk. The sound reverberated more loudly than the rain. She had slapped him with considerable force. Marcus's head turned slightly to the side. A thin stream of blood appeared at the corner of his lip. The valet, who had just emerged, gasped and remained frozen in the doorway. Marcus slowly turned his head back to face her. His eyes were no longer merely calm. They were an unfathomable void. "That," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible, "was the last error you will ever commit as a police officer." Jessica Vaughn's hand throbbed. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a caged bird. For a fleeting moment, gazing into Marcus Thorne's eyes, she experienced a tremor of genuine terror. It was not the apprehension of physical reprisal. He had not raised a hand. It was something primal. It was the chilling realization of a gazelle that had just provoked a slumbering lion. But then her ingrained training, or rather, her detrimental habits, took over. Adrenaline masked her fear with a surge of anger. She could not retreat now. If she backed down, she would be perceived as weak. If she was weak, she was nothing. "You are under arrest!" she shrieked, her voice faltering. She fumbled for her handcuffs. "Turn around, hands behind your back." Marcus exhaled a long, weary sigh. He could have disarmed her in 2 seconds. He was proficient in Krav Maga and had served as a field operative for the DEA before transitioning to his current administrative capacity. He could have deposited her onto the wet pavement before she could blink. But he refrained. He understood the dynamics of the situation. If he retaliated, he would be cast as the aggressor in the eyes of the system. If he resisted, the dash camera footage would depict a struggle. He needed her to irrevocably incriminate herself. He slowly turned and placed his hands behind his back. "I am complying," Marcus stated clearly, ensuring the dash camera and the terrified valet witness heard him. "I am offering no resistance." Jessica snapped the handcuffs onto his wrists, ratcheting them uncomfortably tight. Too tight. The metal bit into his skin, pinching his flesh. "Yeah, you're complying now," she muttered, shoving him roughly toward the vehicle. Her actions were gratuitously rough. She forced his head down, not for his protection, but to assert dominance as she pushed him into the confined space of the cruiser's rear seat. The door slammed shut, effectively imprisoning him. The aroma of stale vomit and disinfectant was overpowering. Marcus sat awkwardly, his hands rapidly losing sensation behind his back. He rested his forehead against the plexiglass partition and closed his eyes. Asterisk, Elena will be concerned, he thought. Asterisk, I need to time this correctly. In the front seat, Jessica was hyperventilating. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles stark white. She needed to control the narrative. She reached for the radio microphone. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I have 1 male in custody, 10 to 15, hostile, resisting, en route to the precinct." "Copy for Alpha," the dispatcher's voice crackled back. "What is the charge?" "Assault on an officer," Jessica lied with practiced ease. The falsehood tasted surprisingly pleasant. It validated the slap. It justified her fear. "Suspect was aggressive. I had to employ necessary force." Marcus listened from the back, his expression unreadable. Assault on an officer, a felony. She was deepening her own predicament with every word. "You have the right to remain silent," Jessica recited rapidly, starting the engine and peeling away from the curb, leaving the hotel behind. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." "I would like to make my phone call," Marcus stated calmly from the rear. "You'll get your call once I process you," she snapped, checking him in the rearview mirror. "If you behave, which I doubt." "Officer Vaughn," Marcus said, "I am going to give you one opportunity to rectify this situation. Pull over, remove these restraints, apologize, and I will ensure you receive only a suspension, not termination." Jessica erupted in laughter. It was a manic, high-pitched sound. "You are delusional, buddy. You think you can threaten me? I am the law. You are merely another criminal in a suit. You probably stole that suit." "Check my wallet," Marcus suggested. "It's in my back pocket." "My identification is within." "I'm not touching your backside," sneered Jessica. "I'll identify you at the station. We'll run your name. See what warrants appear. I'll wager you have a rap sheet a mile long." She cranked up the radio, blasting rock music to drown out his voice. She drove erratically, weaving through the rain-soaked downtown Chicago traffic. She felt powerful once more. She had the perpetrator secured in the back. She had triumphed. Oh, Marcus observed the cityscape blur past. He shifted his wrists, testing the handcuffs. He contemplated the phone call he would make. He would not be calling an attorney. He would not be calling his wife. He would be contacting the superintendent of police. As they approached the 12th District Precinct, a formidable structure of brick and concrete, Jessica deactivated the sirens. She glided into the sally port, the garage door rumbling shut behind them, trapping them within the stark fluorescent illumination of the police station. She exited the vehicle and yanked open the rear door. "Out now!" She hauled him out. Marcus stumbled slightly, his legs stiff. She propelled him toward the entrance of the booking area. "Move it! Don't trip, or I'll add clumsy to your report," she taunted. They proceeded through the heavy steel doors into the bustling booking room. It was a scene of activity. Telephones were ringing incessantly. Other officers were processing intoxicated individuals and petty offenders. The air was thick with the scent of perspiration and stale coffee. When Jessica shoved Marcus into the center of the room, the atmosphere underwent a subtle but palpable shift. A sergeant at the desk looked up, squinted, and then his eyes widened in astonishment. He dropped his pen. An older lieutenant, sipping coffee near the file cabinets, froze mid-sip. He glanced at Marcus, then at Jessica, and then back at Marcus. The color drained from his face. Jessica remained oblivious, too engrossed in her triumphant gloating. She pushed Marcus toward a bench. "Sit. Stay." She approached the booking desk, slamming her paperwork down. "Got a live one, Sergeant. Assault on an officer, disorderly, resisting. He thinks he's some big shot. Refused to identify himself." The sergeant, a man named Kowalski, who had served on the force for 2 decades, did not examine the paperwork. His gaze was fixed over Jessica's shoulder, directed at Marcus. "Vaughn," Kowalski whispered, his voice trembling. "What?" Jessica inquired, sounding annoyed. "I need booking forms. He's got an attitude problem." "Vaughn," Kowalski stated louder, rising slowly to his feet. "Do you have any idea who that is?" "Some guy from the Drake Hotel, probably a pimp or a dealer," Jessica dismissed. "Who cares?" "Officer Vaughn," Marcus's voice cut through the room. He had not sat down. He stood in the center of the room, handcuffed, bleeding from the lip, but exuding an aura of regality, like a monarch in exile. "I instructed you to sit." Jessica spun around, reaching for her baton once more. "Vaughn, stand down!" the lieutenant roared, rushing forward. "Do not touch him!" Jessica froze, bewildered. "What else?" "He assaulted me." The lieutenant ignored her. He hurried to Marcus, his hands shaking as he reached for the keys on his belt. "Sir," the lieutenant stammered, fumbling with the handcuffs on Marcus's wrists. "Sir, I am so profoundly sorry. I don't understand what transpired, but we will have these removed immediately. Sir." Jessica blinked. Her world seemed to tilt precariously on its axis. "Lieutenant, why are you unlocking him? He's a suspect." The handcuffs clicked open. Marcus rubbed his wrists, wincing at the red welts. He accepted a handkerchief from the sergeant to dab at his bleeding lip. He looked at the blood staining the white cloth, then turned his gaze towards Jessica. "I am not a suspect, Officer Vaughn," Marcus stated, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. Jessica flinched, anticipating the production of a weapon. Instead, he withdrew a leather badge holder. He flipped it open. A gold badge, significantly larger and more ornate than Jessica's, gleamed under the lights. "I am Deputy Commissioner Marcus Thorne," he announced, the silence in the room becoming absolute, head of the newly established Internal Investigations Task Force. "I was dispatched by the mayor to rectify the issues within this precinct." He took a step towards Jessica, who had ceased breathing. "And it appears," Marcus continued, "that I have discovered the ideal starting point." The silence in the booking room was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that heralds an impending natural disaster. Officer Jessica Vaughn stood frozen, her mouth slightly agape, her gaze shifting from the gold badge in Marcus's hand to the blood on his lip, the blood she herself had inflicted. "Deputy Commissioner," she whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "That is correct," Marcus affirmed, snapping the badge holder shut, with a sound that cracked like a whip. "Now, fully release these restraints and step aside." Jessica's hands trembled so violently that she dropped the keys twice. Asterisk, clatter, clatter. The sound echoed, amplifying her mortification. Sergeant Kowalski observed her, his own face paling, making no move to assist her. That marked the initial breach in her composure, the dawning realization that her colleagues were already retreating, abandoning her on the isolated island she had constructed for herself. When the handcuffs were finally removed, Marcus rubbed his wrists. He did not shout. He did not rage. He simply turned to Lieutenant Bain. "Lieutenant, I require the body camera footage from Officer Vaughn's unit to be downloaded immediately. I want the dash camera footage secured, and I need the audio logs from dispatch. Ensure nothing is inadvertently erased. Is that understood?" "Crystal clear, sir." "Oh," Lieutenant Bain responded, beads of sweat forming on his brow. "I will oversee it personally." "Excellent," Marcus acknowledged. He then turned his attention back to Jessica. "Officer Vaughn, surrender your service weapon and your badge. You are relieved of duty pending an immediate internal inquiry." Jessica's shock was dissipating, supplanted by a desperate, clawing panic. This could not be happening. She was a legacy hire. Her uncle had been a former captain. She believed she had protection. "You cannot do this," she stammered, her voice ascending in pitch. "You provoked me. You were resisting. I followed protocol. Just because you possess a distinguished title does not elevate you above the law." Marcus drew closer. He towered over her, not through physical intimidation, but through sheer moral authority. "Protocol?" Marcus inquired softly. "Does protocol dictate assaulting a compliant citizen? Does protocol involve profiling an individual based on their skin color and location? Does protocol necessitate fabricating charges of assault to mask your own loss of temper?" I felt threatened," Jessica lied, doubling down on her fabricated narrative. She scanned the room, her eyes pleading for support. "He was aggressive. Kowalski, you understand the environment. You know what these individuals are like." The room fell into a profound silence. Kowalski averted his gaze, staring at the floor, refusing to meet her eyes. "These individuals," Marcus repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "Please, Officer Vaughn, elaborate." "What type am I?" Jessica realized, far too late, that she had walked directly into a trap. She stammered, "I mean civilians, suspects. I am your superior officer." Marcus corrected. "And at this precise moment, you are the suspect. I demand my union representative," Jessica snapped, crossing her arms defensively. "I am not saying another word without my representative present. You cannot interrogate me. I know my rights." "You certainly do," Marcus acknowledged with a nod. "And you will have your representative. However, this is not an interrogation room, Vaughn. This is the booking floor, and at this juncture, you will process me out of the system you attempted to ensnare me within. You will personally void the arrest record." "I will not," she spat. "That would constitute an admission of guilt." "Lieutenant," Marcus stated, his gaze unwavering from Jessica, "escort her to interrogation room B. Summon Captain Miller. Inform him he needs to be here immediately. His precinct is engulfed in flames, and I hold the match." Lieutenant Bain stepped forward. "Jessica, hand over your weapon." "This is unbelievable!" Jessica shrieked, unholstering her firearm and slamming it onto the desk. She ripped the badge from her uniform shirt, tearing a button in the process. She tossed it down. You are destroying my career over a mere misunderstanding. My father will certainly be apprised of this, Marcus stated coldly as Bain escorted a furious Jessica from the room. Marcus retrieved a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped away the last traces of blood from his mouth. He looked at the stunned officers remaining in the room. "Return to your duties," he ordered, "and if anyone tampers with that dash camera footage, they will go down with her." He proceeded towards the captain's office, assuming command of the precinct as if he had personally erected it. However, Marcus was aware that the battle was far from concluded. Jessica Vaughn represented merely a symptom. He was here to eradicate the underlying malady, and that malady was on the verge of entering through the front door. 30 minutes later, the precinct was abuzz with palpable apprehension. The rumor had spread like wildfire. Vaughn had arrested the new deputy commissioner. She had slapped him. Within the observation room, concealed behind the one-way glass of interrogation room B, Marcus stood in the darkness, watching Jessica. She sat at the metal table, pacing nervously in her chair, picking at her fingernails. She appeared diminished now, stripped of her belt and badge, simply a woman in a polyester uniform shirt who had committed a catastrophic error. The door to the observation room burst open. Captain Frank Miller stormed in. Miller was a burly man, his face ruddy, adorned with a thick mustache, and possessing a formidable reputation for making inconvenient issues vanish. He was visibly displeased, having been summoned from a poker game. "Thorne," Miller barked, "what in the blazes is transpiring? I receive a call that you've commandeered my station and stripped one of my most capable officers." Marcus did not turn around, maintaining his focus on Jessica through the glass. "Your most capable officer assaulted a superior officer, filed a false police report, and violated civil rights. Frank, if that is your best, we have a significant problem." Miller huffed, moving to stand beside Marcus. He lowered his voice, attempting a conciliatory, man-to-man approach. "Look, Marcus, I concede Jessica can be a bit impetuous. She's passionate. It's a challenging neighborhood. She perceives someone she didn't recognize. Tempers flared. Let us not jeopardize an entire career over a single slap. I will arrange for her suspension for 1 week without pay. She will pen a formal apology to you. We will dispose of the footage. No lasting repercussions. No harm done." Marcus finally turned to confront Miller. An expression of profound disdain was etched on his face. "No harm?" Marcus inquired. "She struck me, Frank. What if I had been a 19-year-old kid waiting for an Uber? What if I had been a tourist? Would you have subsequently buried the footage? Would you have permitted her to issue an apology while that young man languished in a cell facing a felony charge?" Miller's jaw tightened. "We protect our own. Marcus, you comprehend the code? The code is defunct," Marcus stated. "I have been dispatched here to annihilate it. And Frank," he continued, his voice hardening, "I am aware of the quota." Miller froze, the color draining from his ruddy complexion. "I have no understanding of what you are implying. Quotas are explicitly illegal." "Unofficially," Marcus stated, producing a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "For half a year, I've been scrutinizing the arrest logs from the 12th Precinct, focusing intently on Officer Vaughn's unit. I've noticed an exceptionally high volume of resisting arrest charges that are subsequently dismissed. Furthermore, there's a notable pattern of substantial cash forfeitures, where the declared amount falls short of what the accused claims to have possessed. This all seems to occur consistently on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, precisely when you hold the position of watch commander." Miller took a step back. "You're merely speculating." "I'm uncovering the truth," Marcus countered. "Vaughn is more than just a prejudiced officer, Frank. She's your courier. She preys on individuals who appear affluent but are unlikely to retaliate, or so she believes. She engineers confrontations, makes arrests, seizes cash, and you both divvy it up. The charges are dropped to prevent victims from filing lawsuits. It's a clear extortion scheme." Miller began to sweat profusely. "You can't substantiate that." "My proof isn't required," Marcus stated, gesturing towards the glass partition. "She will provide it for me." Inside the interrogation chamber, the door creaked open. A union representative entered, a polished attorney named Mr. Henderson. However, Marcus had already initiated contact. He activated the microphone, his voice resonating throughout the interrogation room, startling both Jessica and her legal counsel. "This is Deputy Commissioner Thorne. Before you commence, Mr. Henderson." You should be aware that I am extending an offer to Officer Vaughn. Jessica's gaze lifted towards the mirrored surface, her eyes wide with apprehension. What sort of offer? Immunity, Marcus replied. Partial immunity. The charges for the physical altercation will proceed. However, the federal allegations pertaining to racketeering and theft will be dropped. This is contingent upon you providing me with the captain. Don't heed his words, Jessica. Miller's voice boomed, forgetting the microphone was not active on his side. He struck the glass with his fist. Within the room, Jessica couldn't hear Miller's words, but she observed the glass distorting as it vibrated. She appeared utterly panicked. What are you referring to? Jessica inquired, addressing the mirror. I'm aware of the cash seizures, Jessica. Marcus's voice filled the space. I understand the entire operation. Captain Miller is standing right beside me, attempting to persuade me to conceal this matter to safeguard his pension. He's prepared to sacrifice you to protect himself. He just characterized you as hot-headed and a liability. That's a falsehood. Jessica let out a scream, rising to her feet. He instructed me to meet the quotas. He directed me to target the high-end vehicles. Miller gasped. He lunged for the microphone button, but Marcus intercepted his wrist. Marcus applied a swift, agonizing joint lock, forcing the captain to his knees. You're finished, Frank, Marcus whispered. He turned his attention back to the interrogation room. Continue speaking, Officer Vaughn. We are recording. Jessica, realizing she was alone, that her supposed protector had betrayed her. The dam has broken. It was Miller. It was all Miller, she cried, tears coursing down her face, smudging her makeup. He threatened to transfer me to the chaotic South Side if I didn't bring in $5,000 a month in seizures. It was a crime. I never intended to arrest you. I was simply trying to meet my quotas. I mistook you for a drug trafficker. I only wanted the money. Marcus looked down at Captain Miller, who remained kneeling on the floor, utterly defeated. You see, Frank, Marcus explained, karma isn't solely about your actions. It's also about the individuals you entrust with your secrets, and you placed your faith in a bully devoid of any conviction. Marcus released Miller and opened the door to the corridor. Lieutenant Bain apprehended Captain Miller, conspiracy, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. As officers moved in to handcuff their own captain, Marcus turned back to the window. Jessica was sobbing into her hands. The facade of the tough officer had crumbled. The arrogant racism had vanished. All that remained was a criminal recognizing the end of her life. But Marcus was not yet finished. He needed the public to witness this. He wanted the world to see the consequences of power being abused. He retrieved his phone and dialed his wife, Elena. Hello, he said softly, his voice losing its edge. I'll be a bit delayed for dinner, but please turn on the news. You'll want to witness this press conference. The repercussions were catastrophic. By Wednesday morning, the dashcam footage depicting Officer Jessica Vaughn striking Deputy Commissioner Marcus Thorne had garnered 4 million views. The internet christened it the slap. However, the public discourse was divided in a manner that ignited Marcus's ire. While half the city clamored for her condemnation, the other half, amplified by online agitators and police union strategists, was crafting an alternative narrative. Jessica Vaughn would not succumb without a struggle. She had enlisted the services of Arthur Pendergast, a defense attorney in Chicago, notorious as the __1__ Pendergast, was expensive, abrasive, and specialized in representing disgraced public officials. On Thursday afternoon, Marcus sat in his office, observing the television mounted on the wall. Jessica was participating in an exclusive interview with a local news channel. She was not in uniform. Instead, she wore a soft pastel cardigan, her hair styled in loose waves, with minimal makeup to appear younger and more vulnerable. She bore no resemblance to the tyrant who had shouted at him. I was terrified, Tom, Jessica stated to the interviewer, dabbing away a dry tear. Here I am, a female officer patrolling a dangerous sector alone in the rain. A large man, exceptionally large and imposing, disregarded my directives. He invaded my personal space. My reaction was instinctive. I feared for my life. And now, the deputy commissioner is exploiting his authority to dismantle a beat cop because I bruised his ego. This is a witch hunt. Marcus switched off the television, tossing the remote onto his mahogany desk. She's quite adept, a voice remarked from the doorway. It was Elena, his wife. She entered, exuding elegance but also weariness. The strain was evident. She's masterfully employing the scared little girl tactic. She's fabricating the truth, Marcus growled, rising to pace. The footage clearly demonstrates her aggression. It shows her initiating physical contact. People perceive what they wish to perceive, Marcus said, Elena pouring him a glass of water. Pendergast has issued a statement alleging a history of insubordination on your part during your DEA tenure. They are excavating redacted documents, misrepresenting facts. They are attempting to portray you as an unmanageable officer who harbors animosity towards the rank and file. I harbor no ill will towards the rank and file, Marcus declared, clenching his fists. My animosity is directed towards criminals wearing badges. The intercom buzzed. Commissioner, Mr. Pendergast has arrived for the pre-hearing deposition. Send him in, Marcus instructed. Arthur Pendergast entered, exuding the scent of expensive cologne and an air of arrogance. He offered no handshake. He sat down, opened his briefcase, and slid a document across the desk. A settlement proposal. Pendergast smirked. Cease the internal investigation. Reinstate Officer Vaughn with back pay and issue a public apology acknowledging you failed to properly identify yourself. In return, we will refrain from suing the city for $10 million for wrongful termination and emotional distress. Marcus examined the document, then let out a laugh. It was a hollow, mirthless sound. You expect me to apologize to the individual who assaulted me? We expect you to acknowledge the reality, Commissioner, Pendergast stated smoothly. If this proceeds to a public trial, we will tarnish your reputation. We will unearth every suspect you ever apprehended during your DEA service. We will depict you as an irate, violent individual who intimidated a young female officer. The jury might find her guilty of assault, certainly, but by the time we conclude, your career will also be over. The mayor will wish to avoid this entanglement. He will dismiss you to halt the damage. Marcus leaned forward, his gaze locked with Pendergast's. You believe this is about my career, Arthur? You think I value this position? Marcus tapped the desk. This is not a job. This is a cleanup operation. I have no concern if I am dismissed next week. I will bring her down with me. Pendergast's smile faltered slightly. He was unaccustomed to individuals who disregarded self-preservation. You're making a grave error, Pendergast cautioned. Jessica Vaughn has influential allies, powerful individuals within the union. If you press this matter, the streets will become exceedingly hostile for you. No backup, no support. You'll be isolated. I've been isolated my entire life, Marcus stated. Leave my office. As Pendergast departed, Marcus felt a shiver. It wasn't the threat of litigation that disturbed him. It was the mention of allies. Captain Miller was in custody, but Miller was merely a minor player. The corruption Marcus had uncovered, the quotas, the cash seizures, was too intricately organized. It was channeling funds somewhere. Jessica was not merely fighting for her livelihood. She was actively protecting a source of illicit income. And if Marcus disrupted this flow, those profiting from it would become desperate. That night, that desperation manifested at his doorstep. The assault occurred at 2 a.m. Marcus was awake, reviewing financial documents on his laptop in the living room of his brownstone in Lincoln Park. Elena was asleep upstairs. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Crash! The front window shattered inward. Shards of glass rained across the hardwood floor. Marcus was on his feet instantaneously, his personal firearm drawn from the holster on the table. He moved with tactical precision, his heart rate steady despite the shock. Marcus! Elena screamed from upstairs. Remain downstairs! He roared back. He approached the damaged window. Outside, a dark sedan sped away, its tires screeching against the asphalt. The street was deserted. Amidst the shattered glass on his living room rug lay a brick. Wrapped around it with duct tape was a note. Marcus retrieved it, shaking off the glass dust. He peeled the note free. It was inscribed in jagged block letters. Back off, Vaughn, or the wife is next. Marcus stared at the note. A cold, glacial fury settled in his chest. This had crossed an unforgivable boundary. They had threatened Elena. The police arrived 10 minutes later. Officers from the 18th Precinct, not Miller's 12th. They were professional, but Marcus could detect a hesitation in their demeanor. They recognized him. They knew he was the officer pursuing legal action against a colleague. The blue wall of silence was palpable and formidable. Even the well-intentioned officers were apprehensive about being perceived as overly supportive. After the officers departed and the window was boarded up, Elena sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, shivering. "We should go to a hotel," she whispered. "No," Marcus responded. He was seated at the dining table, the brick resting before him like a symbol of defiance. "If we retreat, they triumph. They seek to instill fear. I intend to confront them with war." "How?" Elena inquired, tears welling in her eyes. "They command the Union. They control the media. Pendergast is skillfully manipulating the narrative to the point where half the city perceives you as the antagonist." "Pendergast is engaged in a public relations battle," Marcus stated, rising to his feet. "My approach has been misguided. I've been attempting to prove she assaulted me. That constitutes a he said, she said scenario in the court of public opinion. I need to demonstrate why she was so desperate to apprehend me. The money," Elena realized. "The quotas." "Precisely," Marcus confirmed. Miller remains uncooperative. Jessica is silent, but money always speaks if one knows how to listen. Marcus spent the subsequent 48 hours without sleep. He avoided the precinct. He established a command center in his basement. He leveraged a favor from an old acquaintance at the FBI, a forensic accountant named Sarah Jenkins. "I require you to trace the seizures," Marcus instructed Sarah via an encrypted channel. Jessica Vaughn and Frank Miller were confiscating cash from drug dealers and tourists. They were meticulously logging half of it and appropriating the remainder. But where did it vanish? Cash is exceedingly difficult to conceal in the year 2025. "It's not under their names," Sarah reported, the distinct sound of frantic typing audible in the background. "I've examined their bank accounts. Impeccably clean. Miller owns a boat, but it's financed. Vaughn resides in a rented property. They're laundering it," Marcus deduced. "Investigate businesses, shell corporations, look for frequent, recurring payments to seemingly arbitrary vendors." Hours elapsed. The sun rose and set. Marcus consumed pot after pot of coffee. Finally, Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker. "Gotcha? What?" Marcus leaned in. "I've identified a recurring payment originating from Captain Miller's precinct discretionary fund to a cleaning supply company named Blue Shield Janitorial. It's a front. The company has no employees, no physical office, merely a post office box." "Who holds the post office box?" "A holding company registered in Delaware," Sarah stated. "However, I delved deeper. The holding company recently acquired a beachfront property in Florida, and the deed is not registered in Miller's name. It is under the ownership of Janice Vaughn." "Who is Janice Vaughn?" Marcus inquired. "Jessica Vaughn's mother," Sarah replied. Marcus froze. This wasn't merely a partnership scheme, it was a familial enterprise. "Continue your investigation," Marcus commanded. "Examine your mother's accounts." "Incredible," Sarah gasped. "Marcus, this woman is a retired educator, yet she has received deposits totaling $400,000 over the past 2 years, all in cash. Structured deposits below the $10,000 reporting threshold." "That's it," Marcus whispered. "That's the damning evidence." Jessica Vaughn was not simply a hot-tempered officer. She was the financial conduit for an extensive money laundering operation that exploited her mother's accounts to conceal the illicit proceeds. Miller was not the mastermind. Miller was merely an employee. Jessica was the architect. That explains her profound arrogance. That's why she felt invincible. She possessed nearly $500,000 in illicit funds serving as her safety net. Marcus stood. He grabbed his coat. "Sarah, transmit all of this to the district attorney and provide a copy to the press." "Where are you headed?" Sarah asked. "I have a court hearing tomorrow," Marcus replied, a grim smile forming. "Pendergast intends to ambush me with character witnesses. However, I will present something he does not anticipate." "What is that?" "The truth," Marcus declared, "and I will deliver it in person." The following morning, the courtroom was thronged. Reporters occupied the rear of the room. Jessica Vaughn sat at the defense table, an expression of smugness on her face. Pendergast was engaged in conversation with the judge, appearing confident. As Marcus entered, the room fell silent. He did not appear fatigued. He seemed invigorated. He carried a single manila folder. He took his seat at the prosecution table beside the city attorney. "Are you prepared for this?" the city attorney asked nervously. "Pendergast will dismantle you on the stand." "Let him attempt it," Marcus replied. The bailiff called the court to order. Pendergast rose for his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pendergast began, pacing before the jury, This case concerns a misunderstanding escalated disproportionately by a powerful individual with a personal grievance. Officer Vaughn is a hero, a decorated officer who made a split-second decision in a dark, rain-swept alley. Marcus waited. He endured the fabrications. He endured the character assassination. When it was finally the prosecution's turn to present new evidence, Marcus stood. "Your Honor," Marcus stated, his voice resonating to the back of the room, "the defense contends that Officer Vaughn's actions were driven by fear, by a desire to protect the community. We intend to demonstrate that her actions were motivated by avarice, pure, unadulterated greed." "Objection," Pendergast exclaimed. "Relevance. It pertains to motive, Your Honor," Marcus replied calmly. "I have here certified bank records from the FBI implicating Officer Vaughn in a racketeering enterprise involving the theft of over $500,000 in confiscated evidence." The courtroom erupted. Jessica Vaughn's countenance shifted from smugness to a ghostly pallor in an instant. She looked at Pendergast, panic evident in her eyes. Pendergast froze. He hadn't been compensated adequately for this scenario. "We also possess a warrant," Marcus continued, extracting a paper from the folder, "issued 1 hour ago for the apprehension of Janice Vaughn for money laundering. Officers are presently executing a search of her residence, where we believe the ledger for this criminal enterprise is located." Jessica stood abruptly, overturning her chair. "Leave my mother out of this," she shrieked. The facade had completely crumbled. The frightened victim had vanished. The criminal had resurfaced. "Sit down, defendant," the judge banged his gavel. "You orchestrated this," Jessica accused Marcus, pointing a trembling finger. "You've ruined everything." "No, Jessica," Marcus responded, his voice cutting through the clamor. "You brought this upon yourself the moment you decided the badge granted you the authority to harm others. You desired conflict. You have initiated it." The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick, the kind of heavy, charged air that precedes a violent thunderstorm. This was no longer merely a trial. It was the annihilation of a reputation. The blue wall of silence, that invisible bulwark that typically shielded officers from their own transgressions, had not merely fractured, it had disintegrated. "Order. Order in this court, Judge Harrison." Vance thundered his gavel, striking the mahogany bench with a sound akin to a gunshot. The gallery, packed with reporters, local activists, and stoic officers from the 12th Precinct, gradually settled. However, the ensuing silence was far from tranquil. It was predatory. Every lens in the room was fixed on Jessica Vaughn. Jessica sat at the defense table, her hands trembling so violently that she had to clench them into fists beneath the desk. The pastel cardigan she had donned to project an image of victimhood now resembled a costume. Beside her sat Arthur Pendergast. The man who charged $1,000 an hour to make problems vanish was staring at the bank records Marcus had produced as if they were a ticking time bomb. "Your Honor," Pendergast began, his voice devoid of its usual unctuous confidence, "the defense requests a recess. These documents have been authenticated by the FBI's Forensic Accounting Division." "Mr. Pendergast," Marcus Thorne interjected. Standing tall at the prosecution table, he appeared revitalized. The red welt on his lip from Jessica's slap, now a faint fading scar, served as a badge of honor. They trace the path of every dollar illegally seized by Officer Vaughn. They illustrate a direct correlation from the pockets of citizens to the bank accounts of Janice Vaughn, the defendant's mother. Jessica's head snapped towards Marcus. "You're a liar!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're distorting the truth. My mother has no involvement in this." "Sit down, Miss Vaughn," the judge roared. "One more outburst, and I will order you gagged for the remainder of these proceedings." The prosecution's star witness was called. Next, Captain Frank Miller. He entered the room clad in a bright orange jumpsuit, his wrists and ankles shackled. The sight of her mentor, the man who had instructed her in manipulating the system, now in chains, seemed to shatter Jessica's final resolve. Miller did not look at her. He took the stand and, in a flat, defeated monotone, detailed the entire operation. He testified that Jessica was not merely a participant. She was the originator of the concept of utilizing her mother's dormant shell companies. She had acted as the bagman, the one who assumed the risks on the streets because she relished the surge of power that accompanied it. She relished the fear, Miller stated, his gaze fixed on the floor. She didn't simply desire the money. She wanted the individuals she apprehended to comprehend their helplessness. That's why she targeted the luxury vehicles. She sought to subjugate those she perceived as superior to her. By the time Miller was escorted away, the jury appeared physically unwell. The narrative of the heroic cop had been supplanted by a reality of cold, calculated predation. The closing arguments were a mere formality. Pendergast attempted to argue that Jessica was a product of a corrupt system, a young officer led astray by a crooked captain. But when Marcus Thorne stood for his final summation, the room grew so silent that the sound of rain beginning to lash against the courthouse windows was audible. "This is not a narrative about a system that failed," Marcus declared, meeting each juror's gaze. "This is the story of a woman who exploited the authority we bestowed upon her, the badge, the firearm, the power of the state, to gratify her own greed and her own prejudices. She perceived me that night and did not see a civilian. She did not even see a man. She saw a target. She believed she could apprehend me, incriminate me, and rob me, and that her badge would serve as an invisible shield against the truth." Marcus turned and pointed directly at Jessica. "Truth, however, remains indifferent to your official status. Your standing within the force holds no sway over the inevitable consequences of your actions. You made a conscious decision to engage in criminal activity, Jessica. Now, this metropolis has decided to hold you accountable for it." The jury reached their conclusion in under 2 hours, an exceptionally swift outcome by Chicago standards. "We have found the accused, Jessica Vaughn, guilty on all charges." As the verdict was read aloud, Jessica did not react with an outcry this time. Instead, she slumped into her seat, her forehead striking the table with a muted impact. The bailiffs approached. These were individuals with whom she had shared casual conversation and considered comrades. No words of comfort were offered. They secured her arms with practiced detachment and guided her to her feet. "Officer 492, the judge declared, his voice resonating through the hall. "You are no longer a part of this department. You have brought disgrace to the badge. Your sentence is 15 years in federal penitentiary. Escort her out." As she was led away through a side entrance towards the holding cells, Jessica's gaze met Marcus's. She searched for any trace of smugness, any sign of vindication. But Marcus simply regarded her with a deep, silent empathy. It was the expression of someone witnessing the necessary end of a dangerous threat, devoid of triumph, only the somber acknowledgement that the community was at last secure. 3 months passed, and the 12th District was transformed. The extensive inquiry into the Blue Shield custodial contract had resulted in a complete overhaul of the department. Numerous officers were dismissed, and the discriminatory quota system was abolished. Marcus Thorne now occupied his new spacious office, the superintendent's office. He had been elevated to this paramount position after the mayor recognized Marcus as the sole individual possessing the resolve to restore the city's reputation. He gazed at a framed photograph displayed on his desk, a picture of himself and Elena enjoying a seaside holiday in Hawaii, a trip they had finally managed to take. A gentle knock sounded at his door. It was his newly appointed assistant. "Sir," she announced, "the incoming class of recruits are prepared for their official oath ceremony." Marcus rose, straightening his tie. He picked up his polished gold badge. He held it for a considerable duration, recalling the feeling of the handcuffs Jessica had placed upon him that fateful night. He remembered the downpour, the distinct aroma of the patrol car, and the sharp sting of her hand against his cheek. He proceeded into the auditorium, where 200 young men and women stood in their immaculately tailored blue uniforms, their faces alight with hope and pride. "The badge you are about to receive," Marcus addressed them, his voice projecting powerfully without amplification, "is not a defense against the law. It is a solemn commitment to the public. Should you wield it for protection, you will earn the respect of this city. However, if you choose to employ it for oppression, I myself will personally reclaim it from you." As he extended his hand to each new recruit, Marcus understood that the struggle was far from over. There would always be another Jessica Vaughn, another Frank Miller. Yet, as long as individuals remained willing to stand firm and declare their opposition, a beacon of hope would invariably penetrate the darkness. Justice was not merely an inscription on a building's facade, it was a dynamic entity, and on that particular evening at the Drake Hotel, it had been revitalized. This concludes the remarkable narrative of Marcus Thorne and the dramatic downfall of Jessica Vaughn. This account serves as a profound illustration that regardless of the perceived extent of your authority, your integrity is the sole enduring asset. Jessica Vaughn believed her badge offered her immunity. However, karma has an uncanny ability to find you, even in the deepest shadows. Ultimately, the very man she sought to dismantle became the architect of the system's reconstruction. If this compelling chronicle of justice and decisive retribution has resonated with you, please demonstrate your appreciation by selecting the like button. This action assists us in continuing to bring these in-depth stories to life. Have you ever witnessed someone receive precisely what they deserved? Share your experiences in the comments section below. We eagerly anticipate your perspectives. Kindly disseminate this video to amplify the message that no one stands above legal scrutiny, and subscribe to our channel, ensuring notifications are activated so you never miss an installment of our compelling dramatic storytelling series. Thank you for joining us, and always remember to act with rectitude, for the world is perpetually observing your conduct.